Joe Harding walks into the Williamsburg Savings Bank. He meets an arrogant teller named Chuck, who warns him Joe is behind on his mortgage payments and his employer, Wexler Steel Company, has not paid him for 3 months. Joe immediately demands an explanation for the yellow letter he had received as well as his mortgage cost, which had increased by threefold overnight. Chuck explains that the letter is a foreclosure notice because Joe was late, and he also gives him some nonsense about rising interest rates in recent months. Joe tells him that his children and grandchildren live with him, and he doesn't want to lose his house. But Chuck says Joe have to pay his bills on time if he doesn't want to lose the house. 3 masked crooks with machine guns rob the bank moments later. Everyone is forced to lie down like a cat by the leader. The leader approached Joe when he cramps up and tells him to relax. He reads Joe's bill, and Joe pulls out his wallet to hand it over to the man after telling him how the bank had messed him over, but the man declines and tells him it is culture's duty to take care of its elderly. Joe then claims that Chuck is unconcerned about the elderly. Chuck was approached by the leader, who orders him to hand over his money. At the same time, Joe sees a Genghis Khan-like tattoo on the man's neck. As the criminals flee with more than $1 million, Joe notices poor Chuck peeing in his pants. Joe is interrogated by an FBI agent named Hammer. Joe explains what he has witnessed, and a robber has a Genghis Khan tattoo. He thought that if Hammer could find the artist's tattoo, then he would find the robbers. Joe also suggests Hammer watch a TV show called Law and Order. Hammer then allows Joe to go home. Joe is picked up by his daughter Rachel and his granddaughter Brooklyn. He tells how the robbery happened. Brooklyn thinks it's cool being in the middle of a heist. Her mother disagrees and scolds her. The next morning, Joe is playing bingo with his best pals Willie and Albert at the park, which is being moderated by their senile coworker Milton. Willie reads a newspaper about the heist. The FBI and the NYPD are reporting no leads at this time. Joe then tells them that the robbers did it perfectly. The next day, their manager convenes a meeting with all employees to inform them that the company has been bought out and all manufacturing will be moved to Vietnam. To make matters worse, the Williamsburg Savings Bank manages and cuts everyone's pensions. Everybody is angry. The three then go hang out at the cafe. The waitress gives their favorite pie for free because she knows they're broke. Joe shares his feelings that he was inspired by the robbers, though Willie tells him it may be a symptom of a stroke. Joe returns home and finds an eviction notice after spending the rest of the day with Willie and Al. Joe is heartbroken that he, his daughter Rachel, and granddaughter Brooklyn will be homeless as a result of this. Willie goes to the doctor and is told he needs a new kidney transplant or things aren't looking good for him. He was also compelled to maintain a long-distance relationship with his daughter Carrie and granddaughter Kanika due to his financial difficulties. They send him a shirt in the mail. Al, a veteran jazz musician, is teaching a boy named Ezra to play the saxophone. Both Ezra and Al acknowledge that Ezra is terrible. Al tells Ezra's grandmother, Annie, that her grandson doesn't like music, so he couldn't help him become a musician. On the other hand, Annie is smitten by Al, and the attraction is mutual. Willie's birthday is celebrated by the three pals at a lodge with their coworkers. His pals present him with a watch with Kanika's face. Joe discusses a scheme to rob Williamsburg Savings Bank, as they are the ones who bought out Wexler and are responsible for everyone's pension cuts. Willie and Al disagree with the idea, but Joe tells them that a bank like the Williamsburg Savings Bank is hurting people all over the country. And that by robbing the bank, they can solve their current problem. Later that night, Willie calls Joe and tells him that he wants to live a better life. He begins to think he has nothing to lose if they try to rob the bank. Al still doesn't agree with their idea, but Joe tries to persuade him and it manages to make Al change his mind. The next day, they went to the grocery store. Al prepared his shopping coupons and a list for ingredients to make chicken cordon bleu. But Joe and Willie suddenly put on a hat and take the list from Al's hands. Joe tells him that we have a business, and asks Al to stay in the car. It turns out that Joe and Willie are training to rob by stealing ingredients for chicken cordon bleu. Instead of staying in the car, Al goes into the shop and he accidentally sees his sweetheart Annie working there and chats her up while Joe and Willie try to steal things. One of the security guards chases the two out of the store with their stolen goods. As they try to outrun her, Joe grabs a lady's motor scooter and puts Willie in the basket. Willie tried to throw a bag of pork and flour into the air to block Cindy's pursuit, but they fail to beat the red light and come to a complete stop before colliding with a bus. Al is arrested as well, and they are taken to the security office. And manager Keith shows them footage from security cameras. He warns them not to steal in his shop again and gives them shopping coupons before being released. Al is angry with Joe and Willie and leaves them there. Joe thinks they need a professional to teach them to rob. Joe then brings Willie to Murphy, Joe's former son-in-law who runs a marijuana shop. Joe persuades him to find someone who can assist them in carrying out the heist. Murphy tells them he knows a man named Jesus, the owner of a pet shop, who might be able to teach them how to orchestrate a heist. The next day, Joe and Willie hang out at the cafe, and Al joins in, though he still appears unhappy at them. Willie reads in the newspaper that the Wexler Steel Company is using their retirement money to pay utility bills, and the Williamsburg Savings Bank will manage the liquidation of funds and the restructuring of Wexler's corporate debt. Al is furious after learning that the bank stole their pension. He decides to join them to rob the bank and get their money back. The three then go to meet Jesus, giving him a bag of weed from Murphy and telling him that if he helps them, he will get a 25% reward. To prove they're cool with him, he makes the dudes take hits from a joint. When they bring up the plan, Jesus seems to doubt them and warns them of the risks of robbing, but Joe makes it obvious that it is vital for those closest to him because he and his family only have 20 days until they are evicted. Jesus respects Joe's bravery and agrees to assist the dudes. The three and Jesus are working together for the next 2 weeks to go over the plan. They practice fleeing quickly, as well as how to employ an unobtrusive getaway car, and learn to shoot if required. They then build an alibi, by volunteering on the t-shirt committee for the lodge's fundraising carnival. Before carrying out the action, Murphy comes to Joe's house and is taught to make Brooke's breakfast. Rachel is a little confused by that, as is Brooke, but Joe explains to her that Murphy is making an effort to be a father. Joe takes Brooklyn to school and tells her that Murphy will be there to pick her up later. She has some doubts about Murphy, but Joe asks her to give Murphy a chance. Joe then informs Murphy that if something happens to him, he won't be able to cover for him any longer. He also tells Murphy that he has to act like a man and be a good father to Brooklyn. When the carnival is held, they begin to mingle with people. Joe pretends to replace the ticket keeper, but he just gives his hat to his friend and he puts on a different hat. Al is at the cotton candy booth, but he goes to the toilet as Milton replaces him. He then opens the back of the toilet and exits through the back lane. While Willie puts on a Frankenstein costume and goes into the haunted house, he then changes his appearance into a mummy costume and goes out to the committee's bus. Then they leave the carnival at the right moment to move in on the bank. They disguise as Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr. They enter the bank. Al shoots his gun in the air and told the people to lie down. Joe and Willie immediately order the tellers to fill their bags with money, while Al stands at the table keeping his eyes on the people and counting their time. Just as Willie was about to finish his work, a young girl named Lucy wanted to hand him her doll. Willie approaches him despite Joe's warning to him to stick to the plan, which prompts a teller to press the alarm button. As Willie tells the girl that he doesn't want the doll, he suddenly becomes dizzy because he can't breathe so well through his mask. She tries to help him by removing part of his mask, but she never sees his complete face. However, she notices Willie's watch with Kanika's face on it. Meanwhile, the police have started going to the bank. Joe helps him up and they begin to go out the door, but Chuck the obnoxious teller takes out a gun and fires at the boys, but he is horrible and misses every shot. Al then comes up towards him and ignites his gun, which it's loaded with blanks. The three manages to get out and escape just before the police arrives, and the boys got away with nearly $2 million. They then part ways at a crossroads. Joe leaves by taxi and entrusts the money to Jesus, Al leaves by bus, and Willie drives the bus back to the carnival. At a fancy restaurant, the buddies celebrate their achievement with a performance by Al playing the saxophone in his band. They get drunk, but suddenly Willie passes out while walking through the park and is rushed to the hospital. The next day Joe and Al visit Willie at the hospital. Al is disappointed that he didn't tell him about his illness. Meanwhile, Agent Hamer is assigned to the case in order to track down the bank robbers. After speaking with the manager Keith, who identifies Al's walk in the bank tape matching his walk in the grocery shop footage, he uses surveillance footage from the heist and also analyzes footage from the grocery store. The three are apprehended and brought in for interrogation. They are able to maintain their alibis thanks to witnesses who corroborate their claims that they were at the carnival the entire time. When the bank tape shows Willie's mask being pulled and displaying part of his face, Hamer has them in a lineup. Lucy is called in to help in identifying the men in a lineup. Willie's watch is one of the first things she notices about him. But Lucy informs Hamer that the suspect is not in the lineup. They pass Kanika and her mother as she and her mother leave. The two young ladies share a smile. In the diner, Joe meets Jesus. He brings Joe a puppy that Joe promised to give to Brooklyn if she did well in school. Joe asks if he got his cut. Jesus says he won't take any cut from them. Then he repeats a statement Joe heard during the first robbery, that it is culture's duty to take care of its elderly. Joe realizes that Jesus was the leader of the robbers he had spoken to. Joe wonders about his tattoo. He only has a henna tattoo to outwit the police. Unexpectedly, Hamer's agent shows up at the cafe and makes Joe and Jesus strained. But apparently, Hamer only returned Joe's wallet, which was left in the evidence. Joe then introduced Jesus to him. Hamer notices that Joe is adopting a dog. Things get even more tense when Hamer wants to touch it. Luckily, the puppy bit his finger and Hamer doesn't see that some of the money is taped to the top of the puppy's cage. The three of them then leave the cafe. Meanwhile, Willie gets a kidney transplant from Al, and the three also split their money between their coworkers and the lodge friends. Al and Annie get married. At the reception, Joe delivers an emotional speech. Everyone gets up and starts dancing. The three then share a toast to their good fortune while standing on a footbridge. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, watch video like this. Turn on the notification, and leave a like as really help the channel out.